Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Spotfire session. I hope you've all had a lovely weekend. We've had a very busy weekend with birthdays in this house and it's been wonderful. It's been really, really lovely. Today I want to talk to you about saving face versus taking responsibility. And the reason I want to talk about that is because it is as common as muck. It is something that we see almost on a daily basis. Somebody is challenged, a wall comes up, they push back, they blame, it wasn't me, I didn't do it, and potentially they inflame a conflict or keep a conflict going or create an environment where people don't feel that they can speak up because they think they're going to be attacked. And I want to use a couple of examples to demonstrate this, and one of them is very high profile. And it happened recently in America. Now, you may not all be obsessed with American politics like I am, but I listen to a lot of podcasts with respect to American politics because I find it absolutely fascinating to see how people behave. And something happened quite recently that demonstrates this very, very well. So there was recently, in November last year, there was the midterm elections. And on the 3rd of January, all the people who'd been voted in were endorsed or whatever as a process that as part of the congressional acceptance. And there was a big formal ta-da, these are the new people sitting in our Parliament, in our Congress and the upper house. That was except for one chapter, one area that wasn't covered. Sorry, one district that wasn't covered. And that's because in November last year for the midterm elections, a Republican known as Mark Harris, won the 9th district of the North Carolina seat against a very popular Democrat. And everybody was a little bit surprised that he won. And he kept on saying, there's nothing to see here, it's all fine, no problem here. And the investigators had a look at it. So there was a board of investigations into the electoral results, and the board decided that the results were a bit smelly, and they investigated further, and they held a hearing. The whole time, Mark is saying, I didn't do anything wrong, you're looking for the wrong thing, I'm above board. And he was very proud on the night that he won, and he said, I'm going to be representing you in Congress, and this is all going to happen. The board then held a hearing, and they brought forward a whole lot of witnesses. Now, prior to the electoral campaign, Mark Harris hired a man called McCrae Dowless to run his campaign for him. And it turns out that McCrae Dowless has got a long history of electoral fraud. And what he does is he goes around with the help of people that he organises to do this. He goes to areas where people are aged or poor or dealing with many, many other issues. And he harvests absentee votes. And then they forge people's signature and they forge the vote. It's America, it's different to here, but apparently this is something that can happen. So Mark Harris had deliberately hired McCrae Dowless to assist him with his campaign, to assist him to win. And it turned out that one of the areas within his province, or wherever he was acting for in North Carolina, was one of those areas where the people, there was only 25% of the people registered to vote Republican, and yet they got more than 50% of the vote, and the majority of that were absentee votes. So it made it all very clear that something not quite right had happened. Now, during the course of the hearing, when they investigated this, the stepdaughter of McCrae Dowless provided substantial evidence as to the practices of McCrae Dowless, which showed that he engaged in criminal activities. But what was even more damning was that the son of Mark Harris, who is a lawyer, gave evidence which basically confirmed that his father knowingly hired McRae Dowlis to act on his behalf to help him win that election. Now, because it wasn't a criminal proceedings or whatever, everybody was sitting in the court. So during John Harris's testimony, his father was sitting in this courtroom, apparently crying, as his son gave evidence which said that he had sent an email to his father and CC'd in the mother saying, "I think you've made a big mistake hiring McRae Dowlis to assist you with your campaign, because McRae Dowlis has this history of engaging in fraudulent behaviour." And what was fascinating was that when Mark Harris then went into the witness box, he basically said that he didn't know anything. There was no reason for him to doubt that McRae Dowlis was a good person. And he just blatantly said things that were not true to protect himself. Now, he had the issue of potential criminal activity, perjury, all those things that might have been brought up at a later date. But nevertheless, he had sat through all that testimony. He had all these people talking about what had gone on, and he still got into that witness box and he said, "It wasn't me, I didn't do it." The old Bart Simpson defence. And then he stood down, and he stood down because his solicitors said they needed an adjournment to speak to their client. And then when the client came back and when Mark went back into the witness box, he changed his testimony completely. But this time, he still didn't own up to being responsible for what had happened. What he said this time is that he'd been very unwell in January 2018, and as a result of his illness, he ended up having 2 strokes, and that he was suffering from very poor health, and that he thought that he'd be able to cope with this proceedings, but it turned out that he wasn't. But it now had come to light that McRae Dowlis had engaged in inappropriate behaviours, and probably it was best that they hold a new election for the 9th District of North Carolina. So the panel went away and they agreed that it was best that they have a new election for that district. And then later on, Mark Harris said he would not be standing in that fresh election, which was absolutely fascinating. But at no stage did Mark Harris say, "I'm really sorry, I've made a very poor error of judgment here, and I apologise to the people of North Carolina." He never said that. And I find that really fascinating, because I think that we see that on a fairly regular basis, and particularly with leaders who think that they have to be right in order to be a good leader, which is so not true. It is so much better to take responsibility when you make a mistake, because then everybody feels like this is an even playing field. Like we're all human. We all make mistakes. Things happen. And in this case, clearly Mark Harris was hoping to achieve an incredible outcome, which was to defeat the Democrat, the very well known and liked Democrat, which he did, but he did it through illegal practices. Now, I saw something yesterday which just confirmed what I know about the way in which the reasons why we go to Save Face so often. And I was at a cafe having a coffee, and I saw a woman came in, and she had a 6-year-old and a toddler, and the toddler was in a pusher. And she said to the 6-year-old, "Can you look after the toddler? I'm just going to go and order my coffee." As soon as she walked away, the 6-year-old went to sit in the pram, the pusher, with the toddler, and in doing so toppled the pusher over. And some very kind person helped the toddler up, and everything was fine. And Mum came rushing back. And the first thing that she did was to say to the 6-year-old, "What did you do? Why did you do that? I told you to look after your brother." And I so get it, and I'm not trying to shame this person, but it was, and the reason I'm not trying to shame them is I've done that very behaviour. I know this behaviour. But in that moment, Mum had inadvertently set this situation up by asking a 6-year-old to look after a 2-year-old. She'd walked away, and the 6-year-old wasn't trying to do anything wrong, was just bored, waiting, thought, I'll sit down, didn't work, all of those things. But Mum's response was to be incredibly embarrassed because there was a crowd around her, and the 6-year-old, the look on that face when he got verbally abused in public in front of everybody was one of, I didn't do it. I didn't do anything. And you could just see that immediately he's gone into protecting himself because he's being attacked for something which was pretty minimal. It was just that he got bored and he went to sit in the pusher and the pusher fell over. So we start early. We learn from a very early age that we need to protect ourselves. As soon as we feel the attack coming, up goes the wall and we push back. And what sometimes happens is we don't just push back, but we blame someone else. So we blame the person attacking us, or we blame someone over there. And by doing that, we basically inflame a potential conflict, or we make the situation worse. So last week I talked to you about the work I did in child support, and quite often situations would arise where a client would contact me and I have made a mistake. And I've made a mistake in writing something down, or I've missed something, or I haven't seen a piece of information. And if they rang me and they yelled at me, chances are that I would go into self-defense mode and I would put up a wall and I'd say, well, that's my decision and I don't care, and blah, blah, blah. You know, like, I didn't actually, you know, I wasn't mean, but there was a sense of pushback. But if I immediately jumped onto the taking responsibility line and I would say, oh, I'm so incredibly sorry. I didn't mean for that to happen. This is what we need to do to fix it. Then suddenly the reaction from the person complaining would be very, very different. So saving face happens because we feel under attack. Our brain goes into flight or fight mode. And if we're going to fight, then we've got to protect ourselves. So we've got to divert the blame somewhere, the wall goes up, and potentially we've created a conflict. If we start blaming other people, so I didn't do something because you didn't tell me, or, you know, if we start blaming people, then potentially other people that find out about it then start taking sides and they get involved in the dispute because you've said this about somebody else, and then this other person will go, I didn't do that, or that's not fair, or whatever. And suddenly you've got a war and you've got two sides, and I'm with the leader and I'm with the person, and you've got a dispute for no particularly good reason, rather that because the only reason being that in that instance you weren't prepared to take responsibility for whatever happened, for whatever mistake, whatever oversight, whatever reaction that you might have provided. So I would encourage you, when you feel that sense of being attacked, to breathe and just ask yourself a question: what's going on here? What's going on here? And give yourself an opportunity to start thinking, because as soon as we react emotionally, we feel the heat goes up our head, our back, wherever the heat might be. But chances are, if we feel under attack, our body's going to react and we just go into a self-defense mode. What we need to try and do is intellectualize that moment. It's to try and think, what's going on here? What's important to them here? What are they trying to tell me? Rather than they're wrong and I'm right. Because that just doesn't help you at all. So it's, how do you get curious when you feel under attack? And sometimes the best way to do it is, look, thank you for alerting me to this. Just give me 5 minutes and get back to the person. Like, just say, look, I've got to go. Something's happened. I've got to go. I'll come back to you. Give yourself a moment to think. Give yourself a moment to get out of that emotional state so that you can deal with the problem. You are not going to be responding as your best self if you feel under attack, your body's emotionally charged, and you just feel like you've got to push them away. If you can think about it, then you can respond in a calmer, more rational state. The poor woman yesterday whose 6-year-old pushed over the pusher, if she wasn't worrying about what we all thought of her as she came back to the situation of the toddler nearly landing on the ground, if she could have thought, and she just could have come back and she said, it's okay, mate, we've got this, it's all right, it's all sorted, I'm back now. if she could have thought in that moment to be calm, but she was triggered. She was triggered by the shame of being serving herself by going and getting coffee and leaving her 6-year-old in charge of a 2-year-old, which always had potential for not working out very well. We need to be kind to ourselves. We need to give ourselves space when we feel triggered. The best thing to do is to get out of that situation, breathe, walk, do whatever you need to do, and go back to it when you've got a calmness about you, once you've processed the information. Try not to respond to those situations in the moment. If you do have to respond in the moment, if you can't get off that phone call, if that person's in front of you, take a deep breath. Like, just breathe slowly, breathe calmly. Don't respond immediately. If you need to cough, turn around, breathe. Just try and get out of that emotive state so that you can respond calmly and carefully. I hope that's been of some assistance to you. These situations are incredibly important, and sometimes they're relatively trivial, although to that 6-year-old it wasn't trivial, but situations that happen on a daily basis between parents and children, leaders and their staff or their team, and it goes to the highest echelons of government, where somebody is prepared to save their face, that they will continue to say, it wasn't me, I didn't do it, to save face, rather than to own that they'd made a terrible error of judgment. So when you see it, just realise that that person's saving face, and then think to them, what is the bonus for doing that? Why would you engage in that behaviour? What is so important to them that they need to save face in that moment? And it will help you have some empathy for that person in that moment, because they're embarrassed, they're full of shame, and they're just reacting. They've just put up that wall, the fight wall. And the good old Bart Simpson defence, didn't do it, wasn't me. All right, have a wonderful week. Next week is a public holiday, and at this stage I'm still going to be proceeding. Even if you don't see it live, you can always see the copy later. So if I can be of any assistance to you, please let me know. The Thrive Tribe Live is happening on the 4th of April. Tickets are available through this Facebook group. They're also available via Eventbrite. Bring your team leaders, bring staff. It's going to be an absolutely fantastic day. Kate Burr and I are going to be running it. Kate is a comedian. She's also an expert on leadership. But between the two of us, we are going to have a great day. The two Kates will be in charge, and I would really love to see you there. Okay, have a good one. Cheers.